Arthur Blackwood's hands told a story. They were strong hands, calloused and marked by years of patient work. Not the hurried, stressed work of the city, but the deliberate, measured movements of a craftsman coaxing beauty from stubborn wood. Arthur wasn't a man of many words, but his quiet dedication spoke volumes in the small workshop behind the modest house he'd inherited from his parents. They had been hard-working folk, teaching him the value of honest effort and the quiet dignity of making things with your own two hands. Arthur carried that lesson deep within him. His world was small, bounded by the familiar streets of his neighborhood, the rhythm of his tools and the comforting scent of sawdust and beeswax. He earned a simple living, restoring antique furniture for those who appreciated true craftsmanship, mending things that others would discard. It wasn't a path to fortune, but it was a path of integrity, built piece by painstaking piece, much like the furniture he brought back to life. One crisp autumn, the town embarked on a project to revitalize the old town square. It was a beloved but slightly neglected heart of the community. The Historical Society, chaired by the influential Mr. Harrison Thorne, aimed to bring back its faded glory. Arthur, who spent quiet lunch breaks, sometimes sketching the square's features, the ancient oak, the slightly crumbling stone fountain, the old bandstand where town bands had played for generations, felt a pull towards the project. When they announced they needed skilled volunteers for the restoration of the bandstand, he quietly offered his help. Working on the bandstand was a labor of love. The wood was rotten in places, the intricate carvings weathered and fragile. Arthur spent hours there, painstakingly repairing, replacing, and refinishing. He worked alone mostly, sometimes joined by other community members doing painting or gardening, but his corner of the project was his sanctuary. It was there, amidst the smell of fresh-cut wood and autumn leaves, that he met Clara Ashton. Clara was Mr. Thorne's daughter, involved with the Historical Society as part of her family's extensive philanthropic activities. She was different from what Arthur might have expected, not haughty or distant, but genuinely interested. She would stop by the bandstand, her bright eyes taking in the details of his work. She'd ask questions, simple ones at first about the types of wood or the age of the structure, but soon they talked about more: the history of the town, the stories the old bandstand held, the quiet joy Arthur found in his craft. Their conversations were easy, flowing like the gentle stream that bordered the square. Clara brought him thermos of hot tea on chilly days, and sometimes just sat on a nearby bench, watching him work, filling the silence with her comfortable presence. Arthur found himself opening up to her in ways he hadn't with anyone else. He spoke of his family, his love for woodworking, his quiet dreams. She listened with genuine warmth, sharing snippets of her own life, which, while different in setting, held similar hopes and values about finding meaning and contributing to the world. Their relationship grew like a carefully tended vine, twining its way into the fabric of their lives. It was a quiet love, built on shared moments in the dusty workshop, in the peaceful square, on mutual respect and a growing affection that felt deeply right. They knew their worlds were different. The Blackwoods and the Ashtons occupied very different rungs on the town's social ladder. But in their private bubble, none of that seemed to matter. The bubble, however, couldn't last forever. Mr. Harrison Thorne was a man who valued order, reputation, and suitable connections above all else. His world was one of boardrooms, exclusive clubs, and strategic alliances. The idea of his daughter, Clara, his bright, accomplished daughter, being romantically involved with a simple craftsman from the wrong side of town was not just undesirable, it was, in his eyes, an embarrassment, a threat to the carefully constructed image of the Ashton family. He discovered the extent of their relationship just before the Historical Society's annual charity gala, a glittering affair that was the highlight of the town's social calendar. Clara, despite her father's unspoken disapproval of Arthur, had bravely insisted on inviting him. Arthur, though nervous, wanted to be by her side. He wore the best suit he owned, carefully pressed, but felt acutely aware of the difference between his simple attire and the expensive fabrics surrounding him. The gala was a blur of chandeliers, hushed conversations, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Arthur felt like a guest in a foreign land. He stayed close to Clara, finding comfort in her presence. But then Mr. Thorne spotted them. His smile, usually fixed in a pleasant social mask, tightened. He signaled discreetly for Arthur to join him in a nearby, less crowded alcove. Arthur's heart pounded. He could feel the tension radiating from Mr. Thorne. The older man didn't waste words. His voice, though low, was sharp and cutting, like a well-honed saw blade. "Mr. Blackwood," Thorne began, his eyes cold and assessing, sweeping over Arthur. "Let's dispense with pleasantries. I understand you've been spending time with my daughter." Arthur stood tall, meeting his gaze. "Yes, sir. Clara and I care for each other very much." A harsh, humorless laugh escaped Thorne. "Care? You think you understand what caring means in our world, young man? Let me tell you what I see. I see a young man with dirt under his fingernails, working with wood scraps, who thinks he can attach himself to my daughter's name and reap the benefits of the life she leads." The words struck Arthur like physical blows. "That's not fair, sir. I care for Clara, not her position or wealth." "Don't lecture me on fairness," Thorne sneered. "Fairness is earned. It's earned through ambition, through achievement, through building something substantial, not playing with wood in a dusty workshop. Your craft is a hobby, Blackwood, not a future. It won't provide for Clara. It won't give her the life she deserves. It won't elevate her." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper that was nonetheless filled with venom. "Frankly, you're an embarrassment, a fleeting distraction she'll soon forget. I suggest you end this dalliance immediately. Save yourself the further humiliation of being a constant reminder of her brief lapse in judgment. You do not belong in her world. You never will." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Thorne didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked back into the glittering crowd, leaving Arthur standing there, stunned, his carefully constructed composure shattering. The music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, it all sounded mocking now. Humiliation, cold and deep, washed over him. Thorne's contempt wasn't just about Arthur's job. It was a complete dismissal of him, of his worth, of the life he had built with quiet pride. He wasn't just insufficient, he was invisible, a non-entity in Thorne's eyes. He couldn't face Clara, not like this, not with Thorne's words echoing in his head. He quietly slipped out of the gala, leaving Clara to wonder where he had gone. The next day, with a heavy heart that felt like a physical ache, Arthur went to see Clara. It was the hardest conversation of his life. He couldn't bring himself to tell her the brutal specifics of her father's words. The shame was too profound. Instead, he echoed Thorne's sentiment in a way that felt less accusatory to her, but tore at his own soul. "Clara," he began, his voice thick with unshed tears, I can't do this. Not right now. We come from different worlds. Your father, he's right. I'm not ready. I need to find my way, truly build something." It felt like a lie, a cowardly way out. But the humiliation had cut so deep, he believed Thorne's assessment of his inadequacy. He couldn't ask her to defy her father, to choose a life that her family so clearly scorned, not when he felt so utterly diminished. Maybe someday our paths will cross again. When I'm more." He couldn't finish the sentence. Clara was heartbroken, confused. She didn't understand the depth of the blow her father had dealt him, the specific, targeted cruelty. She pleaded, she cried, but Arthur, believing he was protecting her and wrestling with his own shattered self-worth, remained resolute in his decision. He walked away, leaving behind the woman he loved, carrying the bitter weight of Thorne's words like a physical burden. The years that followed were shaped by that pain. Arthur didn't chase wealth, but he chased excellence. He dedicated himself completely to his craft, but he also expanded his knowledge. He devoured books on architectural history, urban development, community spaces. He traveled quietly, visiting historical sites and restoration projects, learning from masters. He wasn't just mending furniture anymore. He was understanding the bones of structures, the flow of public spaces, the stories embedded in old wood and stone. He became known gradually among a different kind of circle: historians, preservationists, community planners who valued depth of knowledge and genuine skill over pedigree. He still lived simply, but his reputation grew. built piece by painstaking piece, just like his work. He worked on more community projects, volunteering his expertise, understanding that true value wasn't just in profit, but in contribution. The old bandstand stood proudly in the square, a quiet testament to his dedication. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison Thorne's influence in town continued to grow. He was a force to be reckoned with, his opinions carrying significant weight in local politics and business. Clara, after recovering from the heartbreak, had thrown herself into her own work, following her passion in urban planning and community development, though from a different, more structured angle than Arthur's hands-on approach. Then came the controversy that shook the town. Mr. Thorne, spearheading a major new development project, proposed replacing a large section of the historic town square, including the bandstand and part of the old garden, with a modern commercial complex, glass and steel towers that promised jobs and revenue, but threatened to erase the town's heart. The project divided the community. Thorne and his supporters emphasized progress and economic growth. A growing number of residents and preservationists argued for maintaining the town's character and history. The debate culminated in a heated town council meeting, a public hearing where citizens could voice their opinions before a decision was made. The council chambers were packed. Mr. Thorne presented his plan first. Slick, professional, filled with projections of future wealth, delivered with his characteristic arrogance, subtly dismissing any opposition as sentimental and impractical. He spoke of making the town relevant, implying its history was merely an obstacle to progress. Arthur was scheduled to speak later. He sat quietly in the audience listening, the familiar sting of Thorne's dismissal rising within him. He wasn't there for revenge, but for the town square, for the bandstand, for the history he had come to understand so deeply. He was there because he had spent years building something substantial, not in the way Thorne measured it, but in a way that felt true and valuable. He hadn't seen Clara in years, not up close. He knew she was involved in urban planning, and he spotted her in the audience, sitting near the front, her expression serious. Their eyes met for a brief moment across the crowded room. A silent acknowledgement passed between them, carrying years of unspoken history. Clara looked at him not with pity, but with an expression of, was it respect? Recognition? Finally, it was Arthur's turn. He walked to the microphone, a quiet figure in his simple, well-worn suit, a stark contrast to the tailored power suits that had preceded him. He didn't have a slick presentation or a powerful name. He just had his knowledge and his voice. He began not with economics, but with the history of the square, weaving a narrative of generations gathering there, of community celebrations and quiet moments. He spoke of the bandstand not just as wood and nails, but as a vessel of collective memory. Then he shifted, using the detailed knowledge he had acquired over the years. He didn't just offer sentiment, he offered facts. He pointed out flaws in Thorne's plan regarding structural integration, traffic flow, and long-term community impact, citing specific examples from other cities he had studied. He presented his alternative vision, not just preservation, but thoughtful integration of historical elements with modern, community-focused design, demonstrating how the old and new could coexist and enrich each other. He spoke with quiet passion, grounded in a deep understanding of both the physical structure and the human need for connection to place. He answered questions calmly, factually refuting Thorne's attempts to dismiss him as a mere hobbyist. Mr. Blackwood, while your sentimental attachment is charming, surely you understand the economic realities? Thorne interjected with a patronizing tone. Mr. Thorne, Arthur replied, his voice steady, I understand the economic realities of building structures that last, structures that serve their purpose efficiently, and structures that add intangible value to a community beyond quarterly reports. My proposal outlines costs, timelines, and long-term benefits grounded in practical knowledge, not just projections. He wasn't confrontational, but his quiet confidence, his deep knowledge, and his unwavering dignity chipped away at Thorne's blustering arrogance. He wasn't the intimidated young man Thorne had cornered years ago. He was Arthur Blackwood, a master of his craft, a guardian of history, a man who had built his worth on a foundation of integrity and quiet dedication. The council members leaned forward, listening intently. The audience was hushed. Arthur's words resonated. He wasn't just opposing a plan, he was offering a different vision of progress, one that honored the past while building for the future, one that felt authentic and true to the town's spirit. When Arthur finished, a wave of applause rippled through the chambers. Not the polite, reserved applause for Thorne, but a genuine, heartfelt appreciation. The council chairman announced that they would not be making a decision that night, stating that Mr. Blackwood's presentation had raised significant points that required careful consideration. Mr. Thorne's face was a mask of frustration, but he couldn't publicly dismiss Arthur's expertise outright after such a compelling presentation that had clearly swayed opinion. As the meeting adjourned, Thorne, his jaw tight, offered Arthur a stiff nod. "Well-researched presentation, Blackwood," he conceded grudgingly, his voice devoid of warmth, but undeniably acknowledging Arthur's competence. It wasn't an apology, but it was a victory, public recognition from the man who had tried to erase him. Later, as people filtered out, Clara approached Arthur. Her eyes were bright, and a soft smile played on her lips. "Arthur," she said, her voice gentle, "that was remarkable, truly." Arthur felt a warmth spread through him, different from the heat of humiliation. "Thank you, Clara. You said you needed to find your way," she continued softly. "It seems you've built a magnificent one." She looked at him, her gaze open and sincere. "I always knew you had a quiet strength. Tonight, everyone else saw it too." They talked for a long time that evening, not about the pain of the past, but about the paths they had walked, the people they had become. Arthur spoke more openly about the impact of her father's word, not with bitterness, but with the perspective of someone who had used them as fuel for positive change. Clara spoke of her work, her dreams, and the quiet regret she'd carried since their parting. There were no grand declarations, no instant return to what they had been. But as they stood under the soft glow of a street lamp near the square, looking at the bandstand, the symbol of Arthur's dedication and their shared beginning, there was a sense of quiet possibility. Years of growth, separate but parallel, had brought them back to this moment, older, wiser, and ready to perhaps build something new together, this time on a foundation of earned respect and undeniable worth. Arthur Blackwood continued his work, his hands still skilled, his heart full. The town council ultimately adopted a revised plan for the square, incorporating many of Arthur's preservation ideas. He remained a quiet figure in town, but no longer invisible. He was respected, sought out for his knowledge, a living testament to the power of dedication and integrity. His relationship with Clara rekindled slowly, gently, built on the foundation of mutual admiration and shared values. The man who had been dismissed as a simple craftsman had proven his worth not by conquering the world of wealth and power, but by enriching his own world, and in doing so, had finally stepped into the light, no longer defined by someone else's prejudice, but by the quiet, enduring strength of his own making.